It's 7:07. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're talking with Chris Kerosky. He's an immigration attorney here in Santa Rosa. This is a reprise visit from you. Welcome back.
Thank you, Daedalus.
Nice to have you again. I want to talk to you about what's happening with the election and a particular candidate's idea that he's going to build a wall and then thusly stymie immigration. Let's pretend I'm a supporter of that candidate. Tell me how stupid I am.
Well, you know, the wall is not a new idea of Donald Trump. The wall has been an idea discussed and actually attempted for about a decade or more.
When you say attempted, I mean like legislation being passed to actually build it?
Well, there was a lot of legislation passed in the way of appropriations of money by Congress to build the wall or build parts of the wall.
And when you say wall, it's like a literal wall or is it a figurative wall? Like
it's both.
Okay.
So through much of the territory of the border, there is a wall. I think at various parts there's two walls. There are two basically very high fences. The wall takes different forms in different parts of the border. Mm-hmm. But then there are other parts where essentially it's impossible to build a wall. It's impractical and impossible. The costs are astronomically high, and the terrain is such, or because it's private property, or because there's a river there. Right. There's lots of obstacles to doing this wall across the entire border, and that's why it hasn't happened. But what they have done is spent billions of dollars, and I mean billions, on appropriations for all sorts of technological ways of detecting people coming in, as well as quadrupled the Border Patrol staff. So the number of personnel at the border has been doubled, quadrupled over and over again. So there is this fallacy that the border's porous and people are coming in every day and it's very easy. It couldn't be more incorrect.
Right.
Virtually everybody now is caught.
And the question really is, why do we have to solve that problem anyway? Why are we bothering with trying to keep everyone out, or everyone in, as the case may be, versus figuring out a way to create a more dynamic relationship with people who want to be here and go back and forth?
Well, two reasons I think Mr. Trump is seizing on this. One is because this is easier to talk about than solving the problems of assimilation and basically dealing with some of the disparity that NAFTA and other treaties have created on both sides of the border, it should be said, not just America.
Right.
It has also displaced a lot of Mexican farmers, which is also a contributing factor to the migration here. But the other reason, I think, is because it feeds on this fear that people have that their country is being invaded by people south of the border, that they're basically their culture is being diluted. Of course, that's absurd, but that's the way he phrases it.
Right.
And also that, you know, our English language is being displaced in some fashion. So there's all these fears, most of them not based on any reality, that he's playing up to and manipulating by saying he's going to build a wall.
And the consequence of this, though, I would imagine, is an elevation in issues that immigrants have to face in terms of prejudice, in terms of violence, in terms of a whole host of things that occur when you have a demagogical kind of presence on media like that.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's been documented that crimes against immigrants, against certainly Muslims, against African Americans have increased because of the Trump phenomena. It was talked about by Hillary in the last debate. It's been well documented in the press. That is happening in large part because Donald Trump is playing on these fears.
What are some of the myths surrounding immigrants that are being promulgated by Trump and his supporters?
Yeah, I'd like to address that because there are a myriad number of myths out there, some of which existed before Trump, in large part have been exacerbated by Trump. One of them is this concept that, you know, most of the immigration is still occurring from Mexico, that people are pouring in all the time, that our net increase there's been a huge net increase in immigration in recent years. All those things are false.
Right.
And that's what I find also so crazy about the wall. And because the real issue is not only whether we should build a wall or not, but what do we do about all the people who are here? Because most of the people, the overwhelming majority of our undocumented population have been here more than 5 years, more than 10 years. Most of my clients that I see every day, and 90% of them are undocumented immigrants, most of them I see are people who've been here more than 15 years.
Right.
Some of them 25 years, which means the following. It means that they came at a time when our country wanted them, our country needed them. We needed their labor. If you look back in the 80s and the way that President Reagan or President Bush spoke about this issue, it was completely different than the Republicans now speak about it. They expressed a desire to welcome immigrants who were helping with the needed labor shortage. So the point is, these people came in the 90s or in the last decade at a time when we really wanted them, we really needed them. And then afterwards, there's been this trend to change our mind.
Right.
And now we have 11 million approximately immigrants here, many of whom has kids that grew up here. They have houses, they have jobs that they've had for long periods of time. They're pretty much assimilated into our culture. And now you're going to say, let's take those people and we're going to deport all the undocumented immigrants, which sometimes means usually means not just the father and mother, but then uprooting their US-born children, taking them out of middle school, high school, sometimes even college, because they're not going to stay here without their family.
Right.
And they get moved too. And so you're really talking about a lot more dreams that are crushed by this idea than 11 million. You're really talking about 2 or 3 times that of lives that would be severely adversely affected if what Donald Trump wants to do actually happened.
What does it mean to be American? Not just in the context of being an immigration attorney, where you have people who either want to be Americans or are essentially Americans, all but in documents, right? What does it mean to be an American to you?
Well, one of the great things about our country that I see over the 25 years I've done immigration law is that Americans, generally speaking, have treated immigrants from the beginning like they were Americans.
It's an immigrant nation. I mean,
it's an immigrant nation. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
It's our heritage, it's our history. Virtually everybody here now has had generations that go back only a couple of generations, which means if you go back 2, 3, at most 4 generations, usually almost everyone in the country has somebody who was an immigrant, if not all their forebears were immigrants. So we consequently, because we're so diverse culture, heterogeneous culture, we accept immigrants traditionally, very quickly, unlike a lot of other countries in Europe, where you stand out more if you're an immigrant. You're treated differently as an immigrant because those are more homogeneous cultures. So you're absolutely right that historically, traditionally, it's meant to be an immigrant has been one of the defining qualities of what it means to be American. Now, what Trump is doing is playing upon some of the fears I mentioned earlier and changing the way some people look at what it means to be an immigrant.
Let's come back to that. We're talking with Chris Kerosky. He's an immigration attorney here in town. I'm Daedalus Howell. This is 707. 707, we're back. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're talking with Chris Kerosky. He's a local immigration attorney. We left off talking about how Trump is changing the dialogue about what it means to be an American and what it means to be an immigrant within that context. Let's pick up where we left off. How has he changed the rhetoric?
Well, if you look at many of the things he said, and if you want it sort of kernelized into one speech, it's the speech he gave in Arizona about a month ago, right after his visit to Mexico, his much fanfared visit to Mexico City. Then he came back, and that night in Phoenix gave about a 1-hour tirade against immigrants. And virtually everything he said in that speech was false. It was absolute lies. And that can be documented. For example, he said, we don't know how many immigrants there are here. There could be 30 million. Absolutely false. We know that, and we're talking about undocumented immigrants.
Yeah.
He said there could be 30 million undocumented immigrants.
You're saying 10% of the population.
Right.
Okay.
Everyone who's looked at this says that's absurd, that the number is somewhere between 10 and 12 million. And those are based on census figures, not just government figures. Many organizations, nonpartisan nonprofits have looked at this. They all say the same thing. It's between those numbers. Secondly, he at one point claimed there were 2 million people who were serious criminals that were undocumented immigrants. The number is probably less than 1% of that. Mm-hmm. That number is absolutely absurd. And so he used that to build this horrible fear in the people listening to his speech that, oh my goodness, there's 2 million criminal immigrants walking around, that could harm me at any point. And remember, he prefaced that by holding out all of these horrible examples of people who'd been victims of immigrant crime. Right. There were like 4, but the basic implicit notion was that we have 2 million of these immigrants committing these kind of crimes, rape and murder and assault. In fact, that number came from a anti-immigrant organization, and what they're including is people who've been arrested for any reason at all, including traffic crimes.
Right.
The overwhelming majority of those people are people who got stopped for driving without a license, or in some cases, driving with a license that expired, or a traffic violation like running a red light or a stop sign. That number was so totally artificially inflated. And the danger there, the damage that causes, is people listening to that really believe it, and they believe we have a problem with immigrant crime, specifically undocumented immigrant crime, that is far, far beyond the reality.
And that's certainly Trump in fanning the flames, but the spark was already there. What is it about our culture where there's this sort of xenophobia about immigrants?
Well, I would take issue with that, honestly. I think our culture as a whole has a much greater acceptance of immigrants than others. However, in recent years, and you can point to things like 9/11, you can point to things like the downturn in the economy. Unfortunately, there have been various forces in our country, some of whom have been preceded Trump, like the contract with America in the 1990s, spearheaded by Newt Gingrich. Other movements, the Tea Party, that have basically chosen to blame immigrants, castigate immigrants for a lot of our economic problems, the existence of terrorism, just crime in the streets. All of these problems that exist and have very little relationship with crime, with immigrants. For example, the idea that immigrants or undocumented immigrants cause more crime than the average population is absolutely provably false. Everybody who's looked at it says that actually the rate for example, crime by males between 20 and 40 is 1/2 the amount for immigrants than it is for native-born white males in this country.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing is true for the incarceration rate of undocumented immigrants versus the incarceration rate for white males born in this country or others born in this country. It's about twice the amount that it is for undocumented immigrants. So again, there's this effort to flame fears that pre-existed, starting with perhaps the 90s, and then 9/11 contributed to that, and these various incidents of terrorism that are occurring now. Unfortunately, we have decided, some of us in our society have decided to blame immigrants for these problems.
Yeah, I'm with you that America is an inherently tolerant country. I mean, we're predicated on that in our very core and values. But it just does seem that there's a sort of undercurrent that exists in some populations that's inherently anti-immigrant. And I don't know if it's racist. I don't know if it's based on the ideas that you just mentioned about that precipitated this kind of thinking. But it does seem to have gotten worse, at least in my lifetime, as I've observed. is that something that can be curtailed?
Well, I think what we're seeing, not only with the immigration issue, but with other issues, gay rights, other civil rights, gay marriage, for example, and even I would argue the rights of women and equal pay and those movements. What we're seeing is a backlash from the people who don't like those changes in our society.
Yeah, who are those people, though? I mean, why is that happening? Why is that happening now and with such volume? Because it seems like we are progressing along in for lack of a better term, liberalizing and things becoming equal and that kind of stuff across the board. And then there's this holdout population that just wants to medievalize everything, right? And it doesn't seem like we have the right kind of legal tools to address that. And I know you face this sometimes as an immigration attorney. You're dealing with 250 years of like white dude weirdness, right?
Well, it's true, and it doesn't help any when you have politicians, and it's not only Trump, because it preceded him.
Yeah, Trump is just the court jester of an existing situation.
Yeah, the last biggest and loudest one. But the Tea Party also exploited this issue. And frankly, the Republican Party, some members of it, some politicians did so earlier. And I think what you're seeing is we are demographically changing very fast. We are changing as a society very fast. And things like gay marriage, for example, at the beginning of Obama's term, there was even President Obama would not come on record as saying he's in favor of it. That changed very
right.
fast.
It's 7 years now. It's legal. It's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have these changes happening quickly, and the people don't all change their minds that quickly.
Right.
It takes generations in some cases, and I think that's what it is with the Mexican immigration issue. If you look back in the 1890s and 1880s.
Yeah, it was the Italians, it was the Irish.
Exactly.
Yeah, so do you think this is just a matter of time and assimilation and
I definitely do, especially because the numbers are such that, soon the Latino population is going to be close to the white male population nationwide, or the white population nationwide. So you're going to have adjustments and evolutionary change. As I said, I think our inherent nature, and President Obama spoke about this yesterday, our inherent nature is to be welcoming towards immigrants, because we all know deep down that we came from immigrants.
I'm with you. We're talking with Chris Kerosky. He's an immigration attorney here in Santa Rosa. I'm Daedalus Howell. This is 707. We'll be right back. It's 707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're talking with Chris Kerosky, a local immigration attorney. There's a perception, I think, sometimes that immigrants take more than they give in terms of their contribution, or at least their activity here in the States. Is that true?
Absolutely not. And this is again one of those mythologies, those false mythologies that has grown up over the years. It wasn't just created by Trump, but he's playing on that as well. And the facts are, a lot of people think that immigrants are eligible for all these benefits.
Yeah, that they're drawing services.
Welfare,
right.
And food stamps, subsidized insurance, nationwide the Obamacare, subsidized housing. Actually, undocumented immigrants can't get any of those things. They're ineligible, and they never get any of those benefits I just described.
Wow.
But there's a widespread perception that undocumented immigrants.
We should pause here and say, that's not because that's fair, it just sucks.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
And I should say in California, there have been movements to ameliorate that a little bit this year. So now children who are undocumented immigrants can get health care under Obamacare. It's not exactly under Obamacare, it's under Medicaid.
Right.
But Medi-Cal, sorry. But federally, they cannot get Obamacare. And they cannot get any of those other things I described in the way of government benefits. The other thing is they pay a lot more in tax, believe it or not, than the average citizen. Why? Well, first of all, they're subject to the same sales tax, local tax, property tax that all of us are, absolutely. Secondly, when they pay into Social Security, as everyone does when they get a paycheck, they have money taken out that they cannot recover.
Right.
Because they're undocumented, they are not entitled to that money. If they go back to Mexico, they'll never get that money. If they stay here undocumented, they'll never get that money. And the Social Security Administration has estimated that something like $300 billion are sitting in a fund that's attributable to this, the sort of non-claimed fund, and it's primarily undocumented immigrants paying into the Social Security system.
Is that a blind eye situation where Social Security is like, well, we'll just keep this money and let it grow and subsidize the broken system?
In their defense, there's no valid Social Security number to attribute that to, and so therefore there's no way for them to know really who's paying into it. But
there's still $300 million,
right,
$1 billion.
And it's a misperception in society because, again, it's one of those things that they pay into that they don't get any benefit from.
Right.
So at best, from a perspective of us native-born Americans, it's a wash. But in reality, I think undocumented immigrants pay a great deal more into the system than they take from it.
Now, somebody like Trump might perceive that almost as an attractive phenomena, right? The fact that we're getting more than we're losing, right? How do you address that to make sure people understand that it may look like that on paper, but the human toll and the karmic toll, frankly, is really huge?
Exactly. Well, Trump would never admit something like that because it plays against his goal and his supporters' goal of blaming the immigrants for a lot of our problems. The main way to address this problem is to create some sort of comprehensive, sensible, balanced immigration reform that would get these people out from under the shadows, from out of the shadows. I mean, what people don't realize is it's pretty much been 30 or 35 years since we've had, I should say 30 years, since 1986, since we've had any sort of immigration reform that was meaningful. And that means that a lot of these people have been here 3 decades, working in our fields, working in our homes, working in even our hospitals and banks. Believe me, I have clients that are undocumented that have jobs in the white collar society.
Right.
And those people need to find a way to a legal status, at least something that allows them to come out of the shadows and work here so that they can benefit from the money they pay into our society.
Plus, the idea of living in fear on a day-to-day basis, of not being empowered whatsoever to accomplish anything you need to through typical legal channels that are available to all of us native-born people. It's really a kind of heart-sickening tragedy when you find somebody who can't go to college because they don't exist in the system.
It really is. So, for example, there's 1 million young people who, thanks to President Obama, have gotten their status over the last 4 years in a program called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Applicants. And basically, these are people who came here before their 16th birthday, some of them as infants, and they've adhered to the law. They've basically finished school, or they are studying presently. We have said, the Obama administration has said, those people should be allowed to stay. And their lives have been changed, 1 million lives. And we see a lot of them in our office. I employ about 8 of these DACA holders. We call them dreamers. Mm-hmm. So 1 million dreamers have had their lives transformed. If Trump is elected, he will close that program down. He has said so.
Right.
He will not only not allow future people to apply, he will take away those benefits from these young people who've had their status for the last four years, some of them. And that will be devastating. I know doctors, lawyers, people who are professors who are included in these dreamers. And really, we want to take away the status of somebody who came here as a young child, has obeyed our laws, as President Obama said, grew up saluting our flag, pledged allegiance to our flag, and we want to make that person into a criminal. We want to make them take them back to an undocumented status. I think that's obviously something that the majority of our people would not support.
It's un-American to do that.
It's very un-American. We're better than that.
Yeah.
And then The other thing that's at stake in this election, and this is huge for our county, we have a lot of dreamers in our county. What we have more of, though, are the people that would be covered by the second executive order of President Obama, which is known as DAPA. And DAPA, also a sort of deferred action.
They got to work on these acronyms.
Yeah. Well, it's basically a law that says people with children born here that have been here more than 5 years, have obeyed the laws, those people should be able to get this reprieve from deportation too. And bear in mind, this is not a green card. This is not citizenship. It's not even a path to a green card or citizenship. All it is a reprieve from deportation, because that's all President Obama could do. But it allows them a work permit, a social security number that's valid, a driver's license, and they have somewhat of a future to build on. They can get a job in their career. They can move forward. They can go to college, where previously those doors were often shut because they were undocumented. They had to work menial jobs just because they happened to come here when they were 2 years old, brought by their parents. So this second program that would benefit the parents with children born here, 5 million people would be benefiting from this. 5 million lives. I would estimate more than 100,000 here in Sonoma County.
Wow.
And not only they would benefit, but as I mentioned earlier, in some cases there are U.S. citizen spouses. In some cases, in many cases, their children who were born here, they would not have faced the specter of moving to a country they don't know because their parents get deported. So this is huge. It's President Obama's second executive order. It's never been implemented. It's never been implemented because a political lawsuit filed by the Republican leaders was filed in a jurisdiction, Brownsville, Texas, where there was one judge. They knew the judge was an opponent of Obama's immigration policies. Predictably, that judge blocked the whole program. It went up to the Supreme Court, and because of the vacancy of Judge Scalia, it was a 4-4 tie, and the law has never been implemented. Obama is still not able to implement it. So what's at stake in this election? Trump will certainly close that program down or not allow it to ever start. That will mean 5 million lives, and all the lives of their family members will be affected very, very adversely. Those people will be facing deportation again. Moreover, if Senator Clinton is elected, the opposite would occur. That program will likely go through because she will appoint the 9th justice. When the case comes back to the Supreme Court, as it will in a year or two, it will almost certainly be allowed to be implemented, and you'll have all these lives that I mentioned benefiting, coming out from the shadows, getting a work permit, a driver's license, a reprieve from deportation. That's huge. That's huge for our nation, and it's huge for our county. That's
great. Chris Kerosky, immigration attorney here in Sonoma County. Thank you for coming, man. I hope you come back. Remember, these are your friends, neighbors, and family, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So voters, bear in mind what's at stake here. It's very important you vote, and if you have family members, especially outside of California in one of those swing states, please tell them to vote.
All right, come back after the election, all right?
Thank you, Daedalus.
All right.